Looks like we have all the competitors here with their cameras on. If all of the judges and competitors are ready, I'm ready to start the round whenever you are.
Is I'm Ned, right? Is F ready? Oh wait, no, am I F? Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
got
I think
switched
you're.
back. Sorry. I
I
didn't
think you're.
notice that. Yeah, I didn't notice that because I think I was assigned Nick earlier. Okay. Um all right. Excuse me. Sorry. Let me let me open up a different set of docs then because I didn't realize this is where I was this time. Sorry about that. It should be here. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me share it then, actually. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared to share this stuff.
Oh, do you need my case too?
The neg doesn't have a full case until
Yeah, no,
after,
I was asking the
oh,
judges.
sorry about that.
Oh, that's entirely up to you all.
Oh, okay.
Oh, are you sharing? If you're not, then like,
If you're not spreading, then I think it's fine. Or if there's like a card, then we can share. But
if you have anything against, sh like, I don't have to share if you don't want to.
I think, are you going to be spreading?
No.
Yeah, then I think I should be fine.
Oh yeah? Okay. Um, we can do that then. Sure. Okay. If everyone is ready, then I'll go. Yeah? Okay, cool. Um, Framework. The value is morality as implied by ought in the resolution. Ought is used to indicate something that is morally correct. Serbian 18 writes that ought to is a modal verb which refers to something which is morally correct. The value criterion is utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the only possible moral framework. 986 questions. At what point does principle collapse before the consequentialist burden? Absolutist ethics bear a heavier burden of proof than ever before. Further, utilitarianism is necessary for all comparison. When people talk about balancing, they're already thinking like consequentialists. That's why I advocate the plan written by Congress Representative Sanders. One, I see inequality. Inequality is at an all-time high. Extreme wealth concentration benefits the wealthy. Weston 24 writes that the top 10% of income earners earned the country's total income in percentage 48%, making the current period highest points of inequality. Highest wealth concentration makes it difficult to improve economic opportunity, which is harmful for underrepresented groups. Changes in tax policy have improved the plight of the wealthy. Unless these policies change, income inequality will continue. Low tax, lighter regulation, and social policies impede economic opportunities. Economic inequality spurs political gridlock and manifests every extinction scenario. As Cribb 17 writes that income inequality leads to legislative stalemate and government indecision. Politically, countries become more polarized, making it less likely that crises lead to reforms. The capacity of inequality to wreck social cohesion and undermine a collaborative effort to tackle the multiple existential threats of climate, planetary cleanup, or food security, for instance. For our species to survive, cooperation is essential, which is not possible unless the poverty and inequity gaps can be reduced. Inequality-fueled distrust causes extinction via elite capture. Schmidt in 21 clarifies disaster preparedness, high inequality worsens institutional, public health, foreign policy, and other areas. Yet there is a growing consensus that inequality leads to elite capture. Inequality is likely to reduce trust in public institutions, important to reduce existential risk. Direct evidence suggests societies with higher social capital exhibit better preventative outcomes. Empirical evidence suggests that political polarization increases violent conflict and inequality increases polarization. Societies work against inequality and reinforce pro-social norms. The plan redistributes assets and spending, which solves wealth inequality. As Oxfam in 23 writes, tax rates rise in relation to wealth. The tax system can directly reduce inequality by reducing the share of wealth going to the top, distributing wealth evenly. Scandinavian countries are successful. Taxation tackles underlying inequalities of power, limiting monopoly power, including their power to set prices, instead investing in labor conditions and green tech. Wealth taxes deconcentrate an economy, increased government spending on healthcare, education, and food security. The wealth gap, if left unsolved, also drives democratic decline. Recall Schmidt 21 when they say elite capture leads to distrust. Ingham in 21 writes that democracy is in retreat in the US. Creeping authoritarianism has produced the most rapid paces of democratic deterioration. Major economic component to our recent decline, the yawning divide between rich and poor. The US scores poorly on equal treatment under the law, and there's a yawning wealth divide between families. The US is deficient in equality of opportunity and freedom from economic exploitation, faltering in a society with one of the lowest rates of upward mobility in the wealthy world. This leads into the second issue. The second issue is democracy, because democracy is declining right now. As Potts 24 writes, Americans are worried about their democracy at a higher rate than right after the January 6th insurrection. It's a rate of 28% of adults. Democracy has deteriorated. Half said democracy was a bigger immediate concern than economy, and 85% were worried about political violence. Billionaire wealth is soaring, undermining democracy. Ocampo in 24 writes that the billionaire class is larger and richer than ever. Oligarchs hold $5.7 trillion, and that's a $2.7 trillion since 2020. Wealthy individuals use assets to undermine democracy and have enormous power to influence a political process. They spent $1.2 billion in 2020 election. U.S. democracy spills over, and Haas in 23 writes that deep divisions threaten the country's ability to implement policy. Absent a strong economy, economies will grow slowly. A less predictable U.S. would fray alliances, foes grow emboldened, and the result would be a world of conflict. A U.S. divided at home will lack the capacity to exercise leadership globally. And there's no other country that's willing and able to take America's place on the world stage. The US democratic backslide will spill over globally through a litany of challenges, and existential risk will go unchecked. As Belfield 23 writes, a world dominated by totalitarian states risks extinction. They're bad at forecasting and dealing with disasters. They're worse at responding to collapse and extinction and miscalculation due to personalization will lead to war, which makes extinction more likely, raising the chance of WMDs. Less cooperative, and their lack of transparency limits ability to commit. Bad for all pandemics or climate change. Wealth taxes are key to democratic governance as they build trust, because Wallace in 23 clarifies wealth exacerbates inequalities. Power derived from wealth is untouched by an income tax, but the wealth tax can help increase faith by showing the tax system works and applies to all citizens. A wealth tax would express shared commitments and could bolster faith in fair government. A wealth tax can display government competence. The world today demands tax policies should sustain democracy. For all these reasons, I strongly urge an affirmative ballot. I believe that's cross.
What? Yeah, I'm ready to start cross right now.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, wait, just give me a second.
Let's start when you ask.
Okay, yeah. Wait, my timer's. Okay. Yeah, you can start on my first question. Let's start off with your framework and value of morality. Does everyone have the exact same morals?
I wouldn't say that morality can be entirely objective, but it's standardized enough that it wouldn't make a measurable difference in this round. Unless you would like
Okay.
to propose a different value.
Okay, yeah, I can do that during my case. Your value criterion is utilitarianism. If a policy was enacted that benefited the white majority but harmed the black minority, that's still doing a greater good for greater amount of people. But how is that moral?
Well, I would say that it'd actually be worse. The fact is that if you were to make a policy like that, you're not actually doing the most for the most amount of people because you're saying that you're hurting people worse than they are right now. That's a
Yeah,
decrease in
but
the
but if you benefit the white majority, if there's 100 white people and 50 black people, you benefit the 100 but harm the 50. You're doing a greater good for a greater amount of people. That's utilitarianism, correct?
yeah, but there would be a better policy in that
Okay,
scenario that
so
would help all of
utilitarianism
us.
doesn't apply to all instances in this debate, and we have to pick and choose where to apply it. Is that what you're saying?
No. So the reason that I'm saying that we have to use utilitarianism is because there's no other way to do any kind of comparison between policies. And the example that you're giving doesn't exist in the real world and definitely not in the scope of this debate. The
Okay,
wealth tax would benefit all people.
okay, that's fine. So if I can prove that it doesn't, I can win this debate.
No, that's just the value
Okay,
criterion. I would
then
win
it's
under
fine.
a different criterion,
Then
but I would
that's
say
fine.
that the
We'll move on to your first contention about inequality. Does job loss increase inequality?
uh it could increase inequality, but you would have to prove job loss. And you would also have to
Yeah,
give a
okay.
for
Do
that.
reduced wages increase inequality?
Reduced wages again can also lead to inequality, but again, you have to
Yeah,
prove both
yeah.
of them.
Yeah. Let's move on to this concept of a wealth tax. What percent of like wealthy people's assets is liquid versus non-liquid?
I'm not exactly sure on that because I don't exactly remember the definition of liquid and illiquid wealth.
Okay, so
Uh,
liquid is like physical cash, non-liquid is like assets like real estate and stocks.
yeah, so most of wealthy people's wealth is in illiquid assets, but
Okay.
that
So
doesn't mean it's
if
impossible
it's
to assess.
if most of it is in illiquid assets, how are they going to pay the tax if they don't have enough liquid, like physical
Uh,
money?
yeah, so if you don't have enough liquid assets, I believe that the current solution is to take illiquid assets, and I'm pretty sure that's something that the
So
government already
you
does.
can so will so will they be forced to sell their illiquid assets to pay the tax? Will they have to?
I think the government would do it as they do right now.
But there's no wealth tax right now.
Yeah, but situations still exist where people's liquid assets are not enough to pay off
That's
illiquid assets.
that's cross. I'll take running prep and then I can just tell you how much I use. Okay. Okay, I used a minute and 30 seconds around. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Okay. Then you can begin timing on my first word. Oh my god. Sorry. I negate the resolution. Resolved. The United States ought to adopt a wealth tax. Let's start off with the definition. A wealth tax is defined by the Tax Policy Center as that is which imposed on the value of some or all of a taxpayer's assets, such as stocks, real estate, and business. Moving on to framework. Since it is unfair to compromise the welfare of one community to benefit another, I value societal welfare, defined as the well-being of a society. My value criterion is avoiding economic harm, defined as preventing actions that diminish the strength of the economy or cause unnecessary financial losses. This is for two main reasons. One, the well-being of a society and the strength of the economy go hand in hand, since Americans interact with the economy on a daily basis. Enacting policies that leave the economy worse off do not provide net benefits. Two, a strong economy provides greater opportunities than a weakened one. Hence, economic harm does not promote societal welfare. Moving on to my first contention, forced liquidation. A majority of wealth is stored in non-liquid assets, such as stocks. A wealth tax would force the wealthy to sell their assets to pay the tax. DeVito 22 writes that over 60% of the wealth of top Americans is held in equity shares of companies. For example, Warren Buffett holds 99% of his wealth in stock. Mark Zuckerberg holds 95% of his wealth in stock. A wealth tax poses liquidity challenges as wealth is so concentrated in stock, people are forced to sell their stock to come up with the cash to cover their tax. This sale of large portions of stock causes stock prices to fall. Ida 24 writes that when more people are selling, the stock price tends to fall as sellers are forced to lower their price to attract buyers. When large investors sell substantial portions of their holdings, it drives down stock prices. This decline in the stock market causes economic consequences. Anachi 24 explains that with the wealth tax, wages would be 5.2% lower, capital stock would be 16.5% lower, and the economy would have a 6.1% less output than in the status quo, resulting in a loss of $1 trillion. And middle income households would be affected by this drop in employment. Moving on to my second contention, disincentivizes investment and innovation. Innovation and investment is necessary for economic growth. As McKinney 23 writes, innovation is essential for the economy. It increases productivity, spending, profits, and jobs. Approximately 50% of our annual GDP growth is attributed to innovation. Nations with innovation witness higher GDP growth rates than nations who lack it, because innovation stimulates entrepreneurship and investment, resulting in increased economic growth. However, a wealth tax disincentivizes innovation because entrepreneurs and investors don't want to risk exposure to the tax by accumulating non-liquid assets. Hendricks 21 writes that wealth taxes crush entrepreneurial ambitions and make states less attractive to foreign investment. Wealth taxes act as a disincentive to creating new businesses. Investors would invest less and less often to keep more dollars in reserve to pay taxes. Each investment would be more exposure to taxation. Entrepreneurs would find it harder to grow their business, harming the economy in the long run. Contention 3 is capital flight. Wealthy individuals would leave the country, taking their assets with them to avoid paying a wealth tax. This can be seen in other countries that have implemented the wealth tax already. Hickman 19 writes that 9 countries in Europe have already abandoned the tax because people were leaving to avoid paying. In France, wealthy households left the country, taking $175 billion worth of assets with them. Sweden, they raised $500 million with the wealth tax, but lost $166 billion from capital leaving the country. This mass exodus of business owners has several economic consequences. As the Corporate Finance Institute 24 writes, the departure of large sums of money reduces the strength of the economy and the government. Capital outflows reduce purchasing power of citizens and major assets get devalued. What's more, this capital flight causes job loss. Hickman 19 furthers, when the wealth leave, they also stop investing and creating jobs. So France also lost 400,000 jobs, adding 2% to unemployment. Moving on to the affirmative case, let's start off with their framework and their value of morality. During cross-examination, they said that morality varies from person to person, although you can make some assumptions. However, the morals that you and I share are different than the morals that Adolf Hitler shares. Therefore, this term of morality is simply too vague. And this is furthered by his value criterion of utilitarianism. The problem with utilitarianism is it uses this concept that the ends justifies the means. If you can benefit a greater number of people, that means that no matter what you did, it is moral. Furthermore, like I've shown through Cross, we must pick and choose which instances to apply utilitarianism to. Because my opponent, apparently, some situations utilitarianism is wrong. Therefore, you should prefer my value criterion of avoiding economic harm and value of societal welfare. Moving on to his first contention. I have a couple of responses for this. He talked about inequality. However, the wealth tax fails to solve the root cause of inequality because inequality, capitalist domination. Polychronal 24 writes, the wealth tax may sound like a good idea, but can it really solve inequality? No. Even if it's possible to discover all the wealth hidden in companies or put in trust and then proceed with accurate valuation, this will have very little impact on the daily lives of people who try to survive on minimum wages. To effectively address inequality, we must identify the root cause. Therefore, you are simply putting a band-aid on a bullet wound through this wealth tax because it's not solving the root issue of inequality and these structural barriers. Second, people will always find these wealthy people will always find loopholes to evade the tax. Currently, my opponent showed that there are loopholes in the status quo. A wealth tax doesn't suddenly magically fix these loopholes. They will still exist. And even if it solves some of them, billionaires will still hire people to figure out how to put their money into offshore accounts in the Swiss and the Caymans to evade these taxes. Therefore, you're not raising enough money. And worse, inequality will be worse off. During cross-examination, my opponent conceded that job loss and wage reductions cause inequality. But like I've proven through my case, job losses and wage reductions will be a result of the wealth tax through capital flight and forced liquidation. Moving on to his second contention of democracy. He said that people currently influence political process. However, this will be increased with the wealth tax because people want to spend as much of their money as possible to avoid paying such a high share. They could use this to bribe political leaders. Then his main impact was extinction through less trust in the government. However, you should turn this onto my side. People's trust in the government will be worse off with the wealth tax because they are in a worse off situation. Therefore, popular sentiment will increase because people will have a 5.2% reduction in wages and a 16.5% reduction in stocks, along with a 6.1% reduction in overall economy. Therefore, they will feel worse about the economy, about their current situation. I stand open for 3 minutes of cross.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay. I'll start. You talk about capital flight. How do people wait? Oh, sorry. Wait, you said that in response to democracy, you said that rich people are going to spend more money on lobbying to avoid taxes or something like that. Do you have a card for that? Or is that just speculation?
Well, okay. The purpose of all these business owners is they don't want to pay enough taxes in the first place. So why would they keep any liquid assets that they have when they can survive off the non-liquid assets? This will
Wait, that's not the
a wealth
question.
tax will inevitably increase consumption, and this could be spent towards bribing political leaders.
Sorry, so you're saying that the wealth tax will increase consumption and that will lead to lobbying.
Possibly.
Okay, so it definitely will increase consumption, but it might lead to lobbying.
Sure.
Okay. Let's let me ask about you say so when you said that inequality, I'm not solving for the root cause. I think you say that the root cause is capitalist domination. How is not putting a wealth tax in place improving the plight of capitalist domination?
Because capitalist domination, the reason capitalist domination exists is because of the structural barriers that exist in our
So
society.
not putting a tax in place to reduce inequality would
Okay,
actually.
and I also, even if you don't buy that, I gave another response. I said that inequality will be worse off. Like you conceded during your cross-examination, you said that job loss and reduction in reduced wages cause increased inequality. And I proved that throughout my case. So if you don't
Yeah,
buy
I would say
capitalist
that.
domination, you
Yeah,
can go with
I'll
that.
respond to that. Also respond to that in my case.
Okay.
Let's talk about when you said that entrepreneurs they won't be able to grow their businesses. What kind of entrepreneur? I'm assuming you're talking about small businesses here, or here are you talking about how big businesses, their entrepreneurs can't grow their
I'm
big
talking
business?
about investors will be disincentivized to invest in like startups.
Okay, so entrepreneurs can grow their businesses because you talked about business growth. That doesn't happen. There's no impact on that. I just
No,
want to
what I
clarify.
was saying is that for these businesses to grow, they need investors and they need funds to put their product on the large scale market. These investors will be disincentivized to invest because they don't want to put money into non-liquid assets such as stocks. Even if they have a really good return on investment on these stocks, the higher their return on investment, the more they're going to be taxed because stocks are non-liquid and included in the wealth tax. Now that they spent so much money on these stocks, they don't have actual liquid money to pay the wealth tax, which inevitably will cause them to sell the stocks, leading to my first contention of forced liquidation and the economic harms there.
Okay. Let's talk about right now when the government taxes e-liquid. Oh, actually, no, I think that's time.
They don't tax illiquid right now. That's the point of the wealth tax.
No, that's not true. Okay, to clarify, are we on 4-minute prep for this? Three.
Three.
Okay.
Three, Bowen.
Yeah, I think it's been different throughout sorry, excuse me. Excuse me. It's been different throughout my rounds today, so I wanted to clarify. I'm gonna take prep. Yeah, I had multiple rounds tell me 4. Okay. I have like 30 seconds left. If any judges find that my time is wrong, you can correct me. Otherwise, as a quick time roadmap, I want to respond to his responses to mine first, and then I'll move on to their case. If everyone's ready, I'll go. Then I'll start. No. Okay. Let's quickly respond to his responses first. Reiterate my arguments. Well, actually, no. I'll first respond to his response on framework. He proposes a different framework. He tells you that morality is wrong and that we should be valuing, he says, societal welfare. I'd argue that I will concede to that value because I think that it also is most maximized by utilitarianism. So I'll say that you want to keep my framework, but you can follow his value. The reason is value criterion is still most maximized in utilitarianism. Let's to clarify again, in my constructive, I tell you that utilitarianism is necessary to do any kind of comparison. They're obviously doing comparison there, and they're going to do weighing later, and that's comparison. It's not possible to do anything without comparison. They have no contest to that card, which means that it's not possible. Um, that's not even to mention the fact that their only responses are that to my value criterion is that utilitarianism may maximize the benefits for some while not for others, but I'm pretty sure their value criterion seems to be economy. I don't know how that's any better. It seems like that's actually much worse than utilitarianism. In that it's maximizing something that's not even tangible. Let's move on to the responses to my case. My first contention was inequality. The first thing that they tell you is that I'm not solving the root cause. I would say that they're correct in the assessment of the root cause. They tell you that the root cause is coming from capitalist domination. As vague as that is, I'd say that wealth tax is actually improving this. One, we're reducing inequality. I'll get back to proving that later, but we are reducing inequality, and we're taking taxes away from the top. And as our card in Oxford 23 tells you, that will actually encourage investment into green tech and labor conditions. That's what's actually going to help the people, and that's another effect of the wealth tax, which means we actually are solving for the root cause. And I would say that they're actually making the root cause worse, and we're straying from that more. That's why you're still going to be off of their response. Um, then they tell you that it's not helping wage workers. That's first of all, that's not true. Again, like Oxford 23 tells you, invest more into labor conditions, and that's good. Because that card specifically tells you that we're going to move money away from giving back money to the investors because it will be disincentivized by a wealth tax, and that's supported by their own evidence when they tell you that they won't want to get that many as much gains on it. Um, and so they're approving our evidence that tells you we're actually going to be investing more in labor conditions, because we're incentivizing the companies to do so. They're trying to stop improvement by saying that it's not perfection. That's obviously not a valid way to respond. They tell you that they can still offshore. They seem to have not read our plan text. If you read our plan actually includes a 40% exit tax. I don't exactly know why they would offshore to face a 40% tax so that they can avoid an 8% tax or a 2% tax. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. They tell you that they're going to spend money on that to avoid tax. During cross, when I ask them about it, they say the only thing that's definitely going to happen is increase in consumption. That's a basic economics would tell you that that's actually improving the economy vastly, and they would tell you that that's the part they're sure of. The part that they're not sure of is that they're going to put that into lobbying. I would tell you that that's not true, and you're going to prefer that because they have less money, they're actually not going to put it in. That's much more clear reasoning, and you're going to realize that we're actually improving the economy, so that's a turn on their entire case. Um, on their case, you have to realize that investments actually mostly aren't done by that. Oh, Ocampo 24 tells you that a wealth tax would actually not lead to hurting innovation, and in fact, it would also not lead to loopholes. And they also tell you that Europe has bad examples. Alba 19 would tell you that the US is actually in a better position because of the passage of the FATCA Act, which allows us to tax overseas income. That means that you can't overseas. You have to delink all of their arguments, and they don't have access to their impacts.
Sorry, was that the end of your speech or did you mute?
Oh yeah, no, that's the end.
I'll just take my remaining 1 minute 30 second of prep. Yeah. Okay. For a quick off-time roadmap, I'll go framework, framework, my case, their case, and then like weighing. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Okay. Then you can begin on my first word. He conceded to my value of societal welfare, so that's what we were going to be judging this debate on. As for his value criterion of utilitarianism, he said we should prefer it because my value criterion is much worse because we can't compare avoiding economic harm to utilitarianism. But yes, we can. We can see whichever value criteria, whichever situation causes the economy to be worse off than before, that is the situation that promotes societal welfare the best. He says utilitarianism impacts more people than the economy. However, this is completely untrue because the premise of utilitarianism is that some people will still be harmed. However, everyone interacts with the economy on a daily basis. Therefore, the well-being of the economy is, like I tell you in the constructive speech, is directly linked to the well-being of the people in a society. Therefore, you should prefer avoiding economic harm because people interact with the economy on a daily basis. Moving on to responses made to my case. First, I would like to point out that he didn't respond to my first contention of forced liquidation, so that still stands. Moving on to my second contention of innovation. He cited Ocampo 23, saying that business owners will invest in labor and they're driven to invest in labor. However, this doesn't do much if the labor conditions are already bad. Like I showed you with my first uncontested contention, labor conditions will drop due to a wealth tax because there will be a 5.2% decrease in wages because these business owners are forced to liquidate their stocks to pay the tax. Therefore, labor conditions are bad, and investing will simply be creating a perpetual cycle and not do much good. Moving on to my third contention of capital flight. He said that there's a 40% exit tax and people won't leave. Okay, let's assume this. In this scenario, there are two situations. One, they could leave the country, and that's bad because they create so many jobs here, and they would take those jobs and assets with them. So if they leave, that creates a bad situation. Now let's assume they stay in the country. There is still going to be economic harm, like I showed you with my first uncontested contention. They are forced to liquidate their assets, dropping the price in the stock market, causing stocks to diminish, economic output to decrease by 6.1%, a loss of $1 trillion, and wages to diminish too. Therefore, this is still going to cause job loss. So no matter whether they leave or stay, we are still going to be in a bad situation, and we could simply avoid this economic harm by not adopting a wealth tax. Moving on to their case, let's start off with their first contention of inequality. I gave 3 different responses to this, and they only responded to one. It's that we're not addressing the root cause. Okay, let's assume that you are addressing part of the root cause. There are still several other things that are impacting this. First of all, with loopholes, a wealth tax causes the super rich to hide their money in offshore accounts. That means the AF fails to reduce inequality or increase public revenue. Back at 24 writes, 0.1% of the population are ultramillionaires. Now, guess what percent of the population have offshore accounts in the Swiss and Cayman Islands? Mathematical experiments put the potential for tax evasion into the analysis of the wealth tax. At the moment, tax evasion is what is responsible for losses, about 0.25% of GDP. When wealth taxes come into play, that figure could increase by tenfold. Consequently, these policies would generate no new tax revenue. Most of this redistribution would be illusionary. No scenarios where raising the taxes on the ultra wealthy would improve public finances or inequality. These people will always find ways to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. So no matter what you do with the wealth tax, even if it's not perfect, you're still not solving the problem. I'm not saying that the wealth tax needs to be perfect, but it has to do more good than harm. And it is doing way more harm than good because of the severe economic damages that it is doing to our economy. Second, therefore, moving on to my other response, he conceded that job loss and reduced wages increase inequality. However, he has not contested my points on this whatsoever throughout this debate, and it's far too late to do that now. We are simply increasing inequality through a wealth tax, so it's counterproductive. You are making people worse off than before by reducing their wages through this economic harm by forced liquidation and loss of innovation. Then he talked about tax reducing the share of wealth at the top. However, it doesn't help the people at the bottom. These people need interact with the economy the most, and they are harmed by the 5.2% decrease in wages caused by forced liquidation, which he still has not contested, and it's far too late to do so now. Moving on to a second contention of democracy, he said consumption is good. However, consumption in the wrong places isn't good. He can't guarantee where this consumption is going. He has not guaranteed where it is going. And his only thing was saying that was Ocampo 23 saying that they're going to invest in labor. However, labor conditions are going to be deteriorated with the wealth tax. So this investment won't be doing significant good. Then he talked about populist beliefs, and his main point was building trust in the government. However, people's trust in the government will deteriorate with the wealth tax because they will not trust the government's decisions anymore. When the government is being blindsided by short-term effects and not seeing the long-term consequences, these people will be worse off in the long run. Therefore, their trust in the government is going to diminish. They have a worse off economy, worse off wages, worse off stock prices, and less economic output. So in what case are they going to have more trust in the government? Not if a wealth tax is implemented. Moving on to weighing this debate on societal welfare. Like my opponent conceded, we should be evaluating this debate through societal welfare. However, he is prioritizing short-term gains over long-term consequences. Sure, we may see some slight benefits in inequality in the short term. However, this does not override or outweigh the long-term consequences there are. Remember, he conceded that a job loss and reduced wages cause increase in inequality. Hasn't proved that job loss and reduced wages wouldn't exist with a wealth tax. Therefore, his burden is to prove that there's not going to be severe economic harm, and he is simply being blindsided by short-term consequences. Therefore, even if we accept his value criterion of utilitarianism, I'm still doing a greater amount of good to a greater amount of people by avoiding economic harm. Thank you. I rest my case.
Maybe I'll finish up my half minute. If everyone's ready, I'll go. Yeah. Okay, if no one has any objections, I'll start. No. Okay, let's quickly go over util. They tell me that the econ is actually not utilitarianism. That's just a lie, first of all. The economy, like I said in my last speech, is literally utilitarianism. They're telling us that we're maximizing the greatest good for the economy. That's just doing util, but only on one section of a person's life. Obviously, they're doing util, but just only limiting it to the economy. I don't know why they would do that. A person's general welfare is more important than just one section of a person's welfare, and they're still doing util either way. Let's move on. Past that, let's look at what they respond to on our case. They tell me that the rich will never pay their fair share. Again, that's just not true. They're ignoring the entirety of my ALBA 19 evidence that tells you that the US is in a better position than Europe. And they're also ignoring in case through Oxford 23 when I tell you that they are going to cause redistribution. They're ignoring the evidence. They don't provide anything to counter it. I don't know why I'm supposed to believe speculation over some actual evidence with experts that are writing it. Neither should you either, Judge. And I'm sure you won't. Then they tell you that there's loopholes. Again, they're ignoring Ocampo and they're ignoring Elba. They're ignoring Oxford and they're ignoring Elba. When we say that you can't, excuse me, excuse me. The evidence directly says that you are able to patch up the loopholes. The only evidence that they tell you is that in the status quo there are loopholes. This has nothing to do with a wealth tax. Again, the wealth tax, they have presented zero evidence that tells you the wealth tax would cause unique loopholes, and there are, and I have provided evidence that there isn't going to be loopholes. They tell you that the exit tax, they would just leave the country. Again, that is the exit tax. They're misunderstanding the exit tax. They tell you that there'll be liquidation. Again, that's entirely untrue. Also, even if you do buy that, you have to realize that weighing does mean that it does end up worse because they haven't really provided any kind of any kind of impact for their argument, except that there will be a slight a slight increase in unemployment. When it has been connected multiple times throughout both of my contentions to extinction, you have to outweigh that, even if you do buy their arguments. The issue is that their arguments aren't even true. When they tell you that Uh, when they tell you, yeah, in their case, they talk about the liquidation again. They tell you that I haven't responded. The issue is I did respond. I responded in cross and I responded again afterwards. The issue is that there is no liquidation. First of all, it's entirely non-unique because the government does tax illiquid assets in the current day. It's just that they don't tax all of them and they don't tax enough on rich people. Primarily, the issue is that they don't tax stocks and that kind of stuff, etc. But the fact is that a lot of people with lower income right now are taxed, and the government does seize their assets. We don't. There's no reason to believe that this would be any kind of unique issue. But then the other issue is that they just well, first of all, we tell you that that doesn't happen. But the other issue is that they've never even provided a link from not having as much in stocks to leading directly to um, unemployment. So you can't even buy their impact because there's no link to it. And they dropped their entire second contention. You're gonna vote F.